the last 20 years, there's been an intense effort to eradicate the sheep on Mauna Kea. And in spite of that effort, you see the Palila population going down. In fact, the report speculates that there's possibly about 1,000 birds now, and in 20 years or so, they're likely to become extinct. So, you know, it's kind of the definition of insanity. You do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. And the problem, you know, the unintended consequence is that we're getting this huge fuel load up on Mauna Kea. A lot of people, I think, would say, oh, so, you know, the mountain burns, so what? The problem is you have to add wind to that, and suddenly it's a huge danger to the communities. So we're spending tax dollars that it's not getting the job done, and we're you know, risking lives of people who live around the mountain. It's not a problem that's going to be solved in the short term. You know, my suggestion is let's stop eradicating the sheep, let them start to come back. But it's going to be years before there are any kind of population to control the fire load. At that point, we can start controlling the population of sheep so it doesn't get out of hand. As far as the Palila, the state is working on the Kaohe area. They're obvious, you know, my opinion is that they're not doing a good enough job in Kaohe because I don't think the native forest ever had that load of grass. And it's not just in spots, it's through the whole restoration area that you've got that thick, heavy pasture grass. They were also starting to work on the Pu'umali restoration area, and I've not been there. But if they could focus their Palila restoration efforts on those two areas and spend the money, instead of fencing the whole mountain and trying to shoot all the sheep, if they could focus on those areas, allow a controlled population of sheep to be back on the mountain to help control the fuel load, you know, we might get to a situation which is doable. Right now, I know that they don't have the resources to do what they're doing now, plus really do a good job in those restoration areas. They need to be mowed. They need to have the grasses cut. When you walk through those areas with heavy grass, you know, you will not see any mamani seedlings. The seeds that are dropped off the trees can't take hold because the grasses are so thick. So, you know, it's defeating the purpose of eradicating the sheep because you're really not helping the mamani. The only place you find mamani growing is small mamani is where the ground has been cleared by volunteers and they've planted seedlings. So anyway, I just wanted to present this information to say, hey, you know, as a state, we're spending money, making an effort that is not succeeding. And as a byproduct, we're creating a situation that is a danger to the community. And don't take this as criticism of the people working in DLNR here. I've worked with a lot of them, and they're first-class people. It's an issue of the policy and the court decision. And I think it's going to take the governor saying, hey, we go back to court, or we're going to ignore those decisions because they're not working. This, by the way, what you have in your hand is I sent to all the Hawaii or Big Island legislators, okay, senators and representatives. I did hear back from one, and that was David Tarnas. But David, I talked to David before about this issue, so he's aware of it. And he said he did talk to DLNR about it and proposed the solution that I propose, which is to stop eradicating them and focus on the restoration areas for their restoration. You know, he didn't tell me that they responded in any way, but at least he's on board. But he's a new guy. I don't know how much influence he really has. But yeah, the fire breaks can work, I guess, if they're wide enough and maintained. But if a fire is throwing embers, 100 to 150 yards into dry grass that's like tinder, I don't know how effective it's going to be.
If
because
it's as windy as it has been lately.
Yeah. But if you think about it, what I'm seeing is on the west side of the mountain, I don't know what the other conditions are, but that's where the Palila live. You know, a big fire on the west side of the mountain is going to take them all out. So get the governor's attention on it, because I think it's going to take the governor saying, hey, you know, it's too risky, and we're wasting money. Because I don't think they got to go to court, and I can't see that it won't be overturned. I know that 20 years ago, the hunters tried to argue that eradicating the sheep would create this problem. Well, and you guys lost. And the problem's here today. So I think if you go to court and say, hey, you ordered us to do this, it's not working, and we're creating a public safety problem, that it might change. But it would take the governor telling the attorney general to do that.
Yeah, I think we're suing the wrong people. We're suing the federal government. We should sue the state, because the state is the one that is not doing the work.
Yeah, yeah. And not recognizing that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're thrashing around for solutions to the Palila, and none of it's working.
The proposition that sheep could control the fuel loads over there is generally, like, the answer that I've received from them is that sheep are not a consistent form to prevent fuel loads building on the mountainside. Basically, I've understood that sheep are not a good way to control the fuel loads on the mountain. They seem to be, as I've been told, inconsistent with where they graze. And I've also been told that there's other problems if you introduce, animals like that, and if their populations rise, we could see the same thing happening with the mamani saplings as we have with cows entering certain areas in the past. I'm not sure if you have any insight into that.
My issue is we have a potential for a deadly wildfire out there. I've talked to biologists and heard arguments like that, and it's like, hey, you know, we got a bigger problem. We have a public safety problem. You know, and I think somebody at the governor's level could understand that. But if you work inside, you know, the DLNR administration, you're going to run into the biologists who feel that way, and maybe they're right, you know. But I'm sorry, if it comes to mamani trees or my family, you know what my choice is.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
It seems like just from the fire safety standpoint, having sheep not be a consistent control, that's an interesting consideration to be had.
Well, you know, I look at the saddle road by in Hawaiian homelands, you know, where every so often you see these giant herds of sheep. And I'm not suggesting we turn Mauna Kea into that, but you can see what they do, you know, in that area. And so I would argue with that scientific premise.
I have a question for George.
All right.
Have you ever seen an area where sheep are inhabiting, how well they clear the underbrush? And a balance is the perfect answer, but they eat grass. They're better than nothing.
Sure.
If it was only the Palila issue with the state spending money on a program that isn't even working, I mean, you know, they need to change that. But again, it gets back to the fuel loads. And, you know, doing nothing to me is not an answer.
There are numerous places around the world where they use sheep and goat herds to control grass fire fuels. It's a common method, known and proven all over the world.
My community, Waikoloa Village, uses goat herds around the perimeter to create a fire break. You know, I'm not suggesting we load up the mountain with goats, because they tend to be browsers. You know, you can see them reaching up and trying to eat the leaves of the trees. Sheep, I know, tend more to be grazers than browsers, but I understand they will eat some of the mamani, the low-hanging mamani leaves and the seedlings.
The reason they eat the trees is because they don't have a water source. If they have water, then they'll eat the grasses and not the trees.
And I think in terms of consistency, because I've heard that argument also, if you set up their water sources in the areas where you would like to have them operating, they will tend to hang in those areas because a lot of that mountain is dry.
George, District 9. What can the commission do in this regard, really?
I don't know. The one thing that I do want to say is I'm going to push this issue forward, but I don't want to push it forward as a hunting issue. Okay, I know the hunters have a lot of history, and are angry about a lot of what's been going on. The problem is if we push it forward as a hunting issue, it's going to alienate other people who might become allies, if we keep it as a public safety issue. So I'm not sure what the commission can do except be aware and maybe spread knowledge of the problem, that there is a potential public safety issue here.